The roar of motorcycle engines echoed through the quiet parking lot of the roadside diner as the sun began to set. 8 members of the local Hells Angels motorcycle group had stopped for coffee during their evening ride. Their leather vests and patches made other customers look at them curiously. Marcus Iron Thompson, the group's president, was about to get on his Harley motorcycle when he heard a sound that cut through the rumbling engines. A child's desperate cry. He turned to see a little girl, maybe 7 years old, running across the parking lot toward them. Her face was wet with tears, her braided hair had come partly undone, and her yellow sundress was covered in dust. She had no shoes on, and her small feet were bleeding a little from running on the hot pavement. The other bikers immediately turned off their engines as the child stumbled toward them, almost falling from being so tired. "Please," she gasped, her chest moving up and down as she tried to breathe between sobs. "Please, you have to follow me home. My grandpa, he won't get up. I've been trying and trying, but he won't move, and I don't know what to do." Marcus knelt down. His large hands with tattoos were surprisingly gentle as he helped steady the shaking child. His face, worn and scarred from years on the road, became soft with worry. Hey, it's okay now. We're here. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Aaliyah," she whispered, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Aaliyah Martinez. My grandpa. He fell down this morning, and I can't wake him up. I tried to use the phone, but it doesn't work. I ran and ran until I saw you." Marcus looked at his friends. Tommy Wrench Sullivan, their road captain, was already pulling out his phone. Sarah Phoenix Chun, one of only 2 women in the group, knelt down beside Aaliyah and carefully looked at her feet. "How far did you run, honey?" Sarah asked softly. I don't know. A really long way through the fields and past the old church." Marcus made a quick decision. "Wrench, call 911 and tell them we may have a medical emergency. Phoenix, you ride with me. Aaliyah can sit between us. The rest of you follow. Aaliyah, can you show us the way?" The little girl nodded, her eyes getting wide as Marcus lifted her onto his motorcycle. Sarah got on behind her, wrapping one arm around the child to protect her while holding on with the other. The group of motorcycles roared to life, following Aaliyah's pointed directions as they left the main road. Before we continue, if you believe in the power of unexpected heroes and the kindness that lives in unlikely places, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your support helps us keep bringing these heartwarming stories to life. The path Aaliyah led them down was rougher than Marcus had expected. They traveled along a dusty country road that turned into a narrow dirt path, passing abandoned farmland and overgrown fields. The other bikers, Big Jake, Diesel, Raven, Hammer, and Johnny Chains, followed close behind, their worry getting stronger with every mile. This little girl had run an amazing distance, and how isolated the area was made Marcus feel worried in his stomach. After almost 20 minutes, Aaliyah pointed to a small, old mobile home, barely visible behind a group of mesquite trees. The property was surrounded by a sagging chain-link fence, and an old pickup truck sat on cinder blocks in the front yard. As they pulled up, Marcus noticed there were no other houses nearby. The nearest neighbor had to be miles away. The bikers parked their motorcycles and followed Aaliyah as she ran toward the front door, which was slightly open. Marcus caught it before she could rush inside. "Let me go first, Aaliyah. You stay with Phoenix." He stepped through the doorway into the dim inside. His eyes adjusted to the low light. The mobile home was simple but clean, with mismatched furniture and faded photographs covering the walls. The smell of coffee and breakfast hung in the air, showing that someone had started their morning routine hours ago. Marcus moved carefully through the narrow hallway, his boots creaking on the thin floor, until he found what he was looking for. In the small bedroom at the end of the hall, an elderly man lay motionless on the floor beside the bed. He appeared to be in his 70s. His weathered brown skin looked pale, and his breathing was shallow. Marcus quickly knelt and checked for a pulse. Weak, but there. "We need that ambulance now," he called out to the others. Wrench appeared in the doorway. "They're on their way, but we're so far out. It's going to be at least 15 minutes. I gave them the landmarks." Marcus began checking the man for injuries while Big Jake, who had worked as a combat medic in the Marines, pushed past to help. Jake's trained eyes quickly looked at the situation. "Looks like a stroke," Jake said quietly, checking the man's pupils and the way one side of his face drooped. "See how his left side isn't responding? We need to keep him stable and comfortable until the paramedics arrive." Outside, Sarah had gathered Aaliyah into her arms as the little girl cried against her leather vest. The other bikers stood in a protective circle. Their scary appearances hid the deep worry on their faces. Diesel, the club's sergeant-at-arms, was pacing, his jaw clenched. Hammer and Chains had begun searching the property for any other family members or emergency contact information. "Aaliyah, honey," Sarah said gently. "Is it just you and your grandpa living here?" Aaliyah nodded, her voice small and broken. "My mom, she died when I was little. Car accident. And my dad, he's in the military, sent somewhere far away. Grandpa Joe is all I have. He can't die, too. Please don't let him die." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she hugged the child tighter. She had lost her own mother at a young age and understood that fear very well. "Your grandpa is strong, and help is coming. You did exactly the right thing by finding us." Raven, a quiet biker with a long gray beard, came over with a discovery that made everyone's hearts sink. "Found this on the kitchen table," he said, holding up a stack of papers. "Eviction notice. Final warning from the electric company. Past due medical bills." He lowered his voice. "They're about to lose this place." Marcus came out of the mobile home, his face grim. "Jake's with him." "How's Aaliyah?" "Scared," Sarah replied. "And from what Raven found, they've been struggling hard." The distant wail of sirens finally broke through the evening air. 2 ambulances and a sheriff's deputy arrived. The paramedics rushed inside with their equipment while the deputy approached the group of bikers with careful curiosity. Marcus quickly explained the situation, and the deputy's suspicious look softened when he saw Aaliyah clinging to Sarah. "Deputy Rodriguez." The officer introduced himself. "You folks did a good thing today. This area is pretty isolated. If that little girl hadn't found someone, her grandfather likely wouldn't have made it." The paramedics worked quickly, making Grandpa Joe stable and loading him onto a stretcher. As they wheeled him out, Aaliyah broke free from Sarah's arms and ran to his side, her small hand grabbing his weathered one. "Grandpa Joe, please wake up," she whispered. "Please don't leave me." One of the paramedics, a kind-faced woman named Patricia, knelt beside Aaliyah. "Sweetheart, we're taking your grandpa to the hospital where doctors can help him. He's alive because of you. You're so brave. Can I go with him?" Aaliyah asked, her voice breaking. Patricia looked at the deputy, who nodded. "We'll make arrangements. Is there any other family we should contact?" "Her father's deployed military," Marcus said. "Somebody needs to track him down and get him emergency leave." The deputy made notes. "I'll contact the Red Cross. They handle military notifications. In the meantime, does the child have anywhere to go?" The question hung in the air. Aaliyah had no one nearby, and the thought of her being placed with strangers, possibly in foster care, while her grandfather fought for his life, seemed unbearable to everyone there. Sarah spoke up before anyone else could. "She can stay with me. I've got a guest room, and my place is close to the hospital, at least until her dad can get here or her grandpa recovers." Deputy Rodriguez looked surprised but relieved. "I'll need to do a quick background check and contact social services. But given the emergency situation and the fact that she came to you for help, I think we can arrange temporary placement." As the ambulance pulled away with Aaliyah and her grandfather, Marcus gathered his group members. "Brothers, sister, we need to talk." They huddled near their bikes as the sun continued to set, making long shadows across the dusty property. Marcus looked at each face. These men and women who society often judged by their appearance, their patches, their lifestyle. But he knew the truth about who they really were. "That little girl's got nobody right now," Marcus said. "Her grandpa's fighting for his life, her dad's overseas, and they're about to lose their home. I say we do something about it." "I'm in," Wrench said immediately. "Whatever it takes." One by one, the others nodded their agreement. These were people who understood hardship, who knew what it meant to be counted out, to be alone. Many had come from broken homes themselves and had found family not through blood, but through brotherhood and shared purpose. Over the next week, the Hells Angels group worked together in a way that shocked the small community. Word spread quickly about what had happened, how a desperate little girl had asked for help from a group of bikers and found unexpected heroes. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly donations began pouring in. But the bikers didn't wait for charity. They acted immediately. Wrench, who owned an auto repair shop, organized a fundraising car show. Diesel used his connections in the construction business to get materials donated for repairs to the mobile home. Phoenix worked with local businesses to gather furniture, clothes, and school supplies. Big Jake, using his medical background, worked with the hospital to make sure Grandpa Joe got the best care and helped with the complicated billing situation. Marcus himself spent hours on the phone with the Red Cross and military offices, pushing to get Aaliyah's father home. He also contacted a lawyer friend who agreed to help fight the eviction notice for free. At the hospital, Aaliyah stayed by her grandfather's side whenever visiting hours allowed. Sarah had indeed taken her in, and the little girl had bonded quickly with the tough biker woman who had shown her such tenderness. Phoenix taught Aaliyah to braid her hair properly, helped her with homework, and made sure she ate regular meals, small acts of care that Aaliyah had been missing while her grandfather struggled to provide for them both. Grandpa Joe, whose full name was Joseph Martinez, had indeed had a severe stroke. The doctor said that without immediate treatment, he would have died. As it was, he faced a long recovery, but he was alive. When he finally woke up 3 days after what happened, his first word was, "Aaliyah, she's safe," Marcus told him, standing beside the hospital bed with his arms crossed. His large figure was somehow comforting. "Phoenix has her. She's being fed. She's sleeping in a real bed, and she asks about you every hour." Tears rolled down Joe's weathered cheeks. "I tried to take care of her, but the bills, I couldn't keep up. Lost my job at the plant last year. Too old," they said. "Been doing odd jobs, but it wasn't enough." "You did keep her safe," Marcus said firmly. "You raised a brave, smart girl who knew how to ask for help when it mattered most. That's good parenting right there." Over the following weeks, the change was remarkable. The Hells Angels group, with help from a community that had at first been unsure of them, completely fixed up the mobile home. They replaced the bad wiring that had caused the power problems, fixed the plumbing, repaired the roof, and even built a small covered porch where Joe could sit in the evenings. The inside was painted, new appliances were put in, and the home was stocked with food and necessities. When Aaliyah's father, Sergeant David Martinez, finally arrived home on emergency leave 2 weeks after what happened, he was overwhelmed by what he found. He had been stationed in South Korea, and the journey home had been painful as he feared the worst. Instead, he arrived to find his daughter healthy and cared for, his father recovering in a good hospital, and a community of unlikely guardians who had stepped up while he was gone. The reunion at the hospital was emotional. Aaliyah ran into her father's arms, and even the tough bikers standing nearby had to wipe their eyes. David, still in his uniform, turned to Marcus and held out his hand. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They told me what you all did, what my daughter found when she ran to you. You could have just made a phone call, but you did so much more." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Your daughter's a hero, Sergeant. She saved her grandpa's life. We just helped clean up the details." But the group had done more than that. With the money raised from the car show and private donations, including a big contribution from the club's savings, they had set up a trust fund for Aaliyah's education. They had also worked with local employers to get a part-time job for Joe once he recovered, one that wouldn't be too hard physically but would allow him to keep his pride and help his family. The local veterans organization, impressed by the bikers' dedication to helping a military family, reached out to work together. They created a program where the Hells Angels group would be told whenever a deployed service member's family needed help. The bikers, many of whom were veterans themselves, accepted this new role with excitement. 3 months after that important day, the community held a celebration at the fixed-up mobile home. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to Joe in years came by to welcome him back and to meet the bikers who had changed everything. Local businesses provided food, and children played in the yard while adults shared stories and laughter. Aaliyah, wearing a new dress that Phoenix had bought her, stood between her grandfather, who was walking with a cane but smiling widely, and her father, who had been given extra leave to help with the recovery. She watched as Marcus and his group members arrived on their motorcycles. The rumble of engines was no longer something scary, but a sound of comfort and joy. "Grandpa Joe," Aaliyah said, tugging on his sleeve. "Can I go say hi?" "Of course, Mija," he replied. His speech was still a little slurred, but getting better every day. Aaliyah ran across the yard and threw her arms around Marcus's waist. The big biker lifted her up easily, holding her on his hip as naturally as if she were his own granddaughter. "How's my favorite brave girl?" he asked. "Good," Aaliyah beamed. "Daddy says we can stay here now." He's getting stationed somewhere closer when his time overseas ends. And Grandpa Joe is getting better every day. The doctor said he's really strong. That's because strength runs in your family, Marcus said, setting her down gently. You proved that when you ran for help instead of giving up. Phoenix came over with a gift box. This is from all of us, she said, handing it to Aaliyah. Inside was a leather vest, child-sized, with a special patch sewn on the back. It wasn't a club patch. The Hells Angels would never break their traditions, but rather a custom design that read, Honorary Little Sister, with an angel's wing design. Aaliyah's eyes went wide with wonder. We wanted you to know that you're part of our family now, Phoenix explained, her voice soft. Whenever you need anything, you can count on us. As the sun set over the property that evening, Joe stood on his new porch, watching the celebration. Deputy Rodriguez had stopped by, no longer in uniform, but as a friend. Sarah was teaching Aaliyah and some other neighborhood kids how to play a card game. The other bikers were helping David set up a grill, sharing military stories and jokes. The sound of laughter filled the air where there had once been only struggle and silence. Marcus joined Joe on the porch, handing him a cold drink. The two men stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the scene in front of them. You know, Joe said finally, before all this, I thought I was going to lose everything. I thought I had failed Aaliyah, failed my son. I was too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to admit I couldn't do it alone anymore. Pride can be dangerous, Marcus agreed. But so can judgment. Most people see us and make assumptions. See the leather, the patches, the bikes, and think they know who we are. But this club, it's about family. It's about loyalty. It's about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Joe turned to face him. Aaliyah talks about you all constantly. You and Phoenix especially. She says Phoenix braids her hair better than I ever could. He laughed, then grew serious. She has nightmares sometimes about that day, about finding me on the floor and being alone. But then she remembers that she found you, and she feels safe again. She's always going to be safe, Marcus promised. We keep our word. We're here for the long haul. And they were. In the months and years that followed, the relationship between the Hells Angels group and the Martinez family grew stronger. When Aaliyah started school, Phoenix went to her school events alongside her father and grandfather. When Joe had follow-up medical appointments, there was always a biker available to drive him. When David's unit was sent away again briefly before his transfer went through, the club made sure Joe and Aaliyah were never alone. The story spread beyond the local community. National news outlets picked it up, interested in the story of tough bikers becoming unlikely heroes to a desperate child. Some tried to paint it as unusual or surprising. But those who knew the Hells Angels understood this was exactly who they had always been. People who protected the vulnerable, who valued loyalty above all else, and who understood that family wasn't always defined by blood. The group began getting letters from other communities asking for help starting similar programs. Marcus and his team created guidelines for how motorcycle clubs could work with local organizations to support at-risk families, veterans, and children in need. What had started as one little girl's desperate plea for help had sparked a movement. Years later, Aaliyah would stand at her high school graduation. The scholarship fund the bikers had set up for her made college possible. As she walked across the stage to get her diploma, she saw them in the audience. Marcus, Phoenix, Wrench, and the others, some grayer now, but still there, still family. They cheered louder than anyone else, their pride clear. In her valedictorian speech, Aaliyah shared her story. She spoke about the day she ran through fields and along dusty roads, terrified and alone, until she saw a group of motorcycles parked outside a diner. She talked about how easy it would have been to judge them by their appearance, to assume they wouldn't care about a scared little girl. Instead, she had found heroes. People are not always what they seem, she told her classmates in the crowd. Kindness doesn't have a dress code. Compassion doesn't require a certain look or lifestyle. The people who saved my grandfather and changed my family's life forever are people who society often dismisses or fears. But they taught me that real strength is using your power to help others. Real courage is standing up when nobody expects you to. And real family is the people who show up when you need them most.